Every Saturday at 4 o'clock, Lillian Carter made her way to the same bench near Canterbury Cathedral. The town's gentle bustle moved around her, but she remained steadfast, carrying a small tray with 2 cups of steaming coffee and a slice of lemon drizzle cake. The bench was always the same, under the shade of an old oak tree, facing the path where visitors often passed. Lillian placed the tray carefully and took her seat. She would drink 1 cup slowly, her eyes fixed on the cathedral's great doors, waiting. The second cup sat untouched beside her, its steam curling into the cool afternoon air. Passers-by recognized Lillian. The cafe staff knew her order by heart but never dared to ask why she always prepared for 2. Her son, Thomas Carter, had long stopped asking. Now a successful lawyer in Birmingham, Thomas saw his mother's ritual as a peculiar attachment to a past that he believed should be left behind. One afternoon, Thomas called to remind her he would be visiting soon. Lillian's smile was soft, but her eyes betrayed a quiet sadness. "I'll be here, as always," she said. The clock struck 4. And yet, the second cup remained untouched. Lillian had not always been the quiet figure waiting by the cathedral. Years ago, she was a lively woman, full of laughter and dreams, raising her young son Thomas with warmth and hope. Canterbury was home, and the cathedral's bells had marked the rhythm of her life: weddings, christenings, festivals, moments filled with joy and promise. But everything changed one rainy autumn evening. Thomas's father, Daniel, a charming man with a restless spirit, had promised to return that night after a business trip in London. Lillian waited at the bench, 2 cups in hand, as she did every Saturday since Thomas's birth, believing in the promise of his return. Hours passed, then days, but Daniel never came back. The phone calls went unanswered. Letters were left unopened. Slowly, the man who had once filled her world with hope faded into a ghost she spoke of only in whispers. Lillian's Saturday ritual was born from that night, a steadfast wait for a man who might never return. It was her way to hold on to love, to hope, even when reality tore it apart. The second cup was never for a guest, but a symbol of faith and memory. Thomas grew up knowing only fragments of the past. Lillian shielded him from the pain, believing he deserved a life unburdened by old wounds. He excelled at school, left Canterbury for university, and built a life far from the bench and the cathedral's shadow. Yet, despite his success, there was a growing distance between mother and son. Thomas's visits became infrequent. Calls went unanswered or brief. To him, Lillian's unwavering wait seemed like a haunting fixation, something to escape rather than embrace. On one visit, Thomas found her seated alone, eyes tracing the cathedral's doors as always. "Why do you keep waiting, Mum?" he asked, frustration tinged with concern. Lillian smiled softly, brushing a stray grey hair behind her ear. "Because some promises, no matter how broken, deserve to be honored." But Thomas shook his head, unable to understand a faith so quiet yet so unyielding. As the years passed, the bench by the cathedral remained, a silent witness to a story only half told, waiting for the day when Thomas might finally see beyond the shadow of the past. Years had slipped by like the flowing river Stour, carrying memories and unspoken words along its current. Thomas Carter's life had grown busier, filled with courtrooms and client meetings, late nights and early mornings. His London office was a world away from the peaceful streets of Canterbury where his mother waited patiently every weekend. Despite his success, Thomas could not deny a persistent tug in his heart whenever he thought of his mother. Yet, pride and the weight of his own ambitions kept him distant. Calls home became shorter, visits rarer, and the space between them wider. Lillian, meanwhile, remained at the bench every Saturday without fail. The townsfolk admired her quiet strength, but many whispered behind her back, seeing her ritual as a strange obsession. The cafe staff sometimes left a little extra cake on her tray, a small kindness for the lonely woman who ordered 2 cups every week. One chilly autumn afternoon, as leaves fell in golden carpets, Thomas finally returned to Canterbury. He had not seen his mother in over a year. He wondered if she would still be there, waiting in her usual place. Walking through the familiar streets, memories flooded back, the smell of baked bread from the corner shop, children playing near the cathedral steps, and the comforting chime of the bells marking the hour. There she was, exactly as he remembered, seated on the old oak bench. 2 cups of coffee, one untouched, and the same wistful gaze fixed on the cathedral doors. "Mother," he said softly, unsure if he should sit beside her. Lillian looked up, her eyes brightening. "Thomas, you're home." He took a seat and glanced at the second cup. "Do you really expect him to come back?" She smiled sadly. "It's not about expecting, my dear. It's about remembering and hoping. Some things we hold on to, even when the world tells us to let go." Thomas struggled to find the words to bridge the gap years had created. He wanted to understand, to comfort, but felt like a stranger in his own family story. As the clock struck 4, the second cup sat silent and still, a symbol of love's endurance in the face of absence. The days following Thomas's return were filled with quiet conversations and tentative attempts to rebuild what time had worn thin. Lillian spoke little about her years of waiting, but one evening, as the sun dipped behind Canterbury's ancient walls, she handed Thomas a worn leather-bound journal. "This was his," she said softly, her fingers trembling. "Daniel's. I kept it safe, hoping one day you might want to understand." Thomas took the journal with a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. Its pages were yellowed and delicate, filled with neat handwriting that told stories of hope, doubt, and dreams that never fully came true. He read about Daniel's struggles, the pressures of work, the temptations of a restless life, and his deep love for Lillian and Thomas. There were apologies hidden in the margins, promises to return, and explanations for his silence. But the most haunting entries were those written in the weeks after he left Canterbury, a man torn between responsibility and freedom, unable to face the consequences of his absence. For the first time, Thomas saw his father not as a ghost or a villain, but as a flawed man caught in his own storms. It was a revelation that shifted something inside him. That night, Thomas and Lillian talked long into the evening. They shared memories, fears, and the weight of years spent apart. The journal became a bridge, connecting past pain with the possibility of understanding and forgiveness. Though Daniel had never returned to the bench by the cathedral, his words, preserved in ink and paper, finally found a way home. The following Sunday, as the church bells echoed softly across Canterbury, Thomas accompanied Lillian to the cafe where she had spent countless Saturdays waiting. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of freshly brewed tea and baked pastries. They sat in a quiet corner, where Lillian usually reserved her seat by the window, watching the world go by. Today, however, the bench near the cathedral seemed less lonely, as if the weight of years was gently lifting. Thomas glanced at his mother, noticing the lines on her face, the quiet strength in her eyes. "Mum," he began hesitantly, "why did you never tell me about him?" "About Daniel?" Lillian took a deep breath, her hands wrapped tightly around her cup. "I wanted to protect you. I thought the less you knew, the easier your life would be." But hiding the truth made it harder, Thomas replied, the pain in his voice unmistakable. "I grew up with questions, with a hole I couldn't fill." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "I was afraid. Afraid you would resent him, or me, for the life we had. But now I see that silence only built walls between us." Thomas reached out, taking her hand in his. "It's not too late, Mum. We can start to heal. Together." The moment was fragile but real, two souls seeking reconciliation in the shadow of a past long buried. Outside, the cathedral bells tolled again, marking not just the hour but the beginning of something new. Days turned into weeks, and Thomas found himself visiting Canterbury more often than he had in years. Each visit peeled away layers of regret and misunderstanding that had built up between him and Lillian. They spent long afternoons at the cafe, sharing stories and laughter, rediscovering the warmth of their bond. One rainy afternoon, As droplets tapped softly against the window, Lillian showed Thomas a collection of letters tucked away in a small wooden box. The letters were from Daniel, written in the months after he left, a mixture of apologies, explanations, and desperate hopes for reconciliation. Thomas carefully unfolded one letter, his eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. My dearest Lillian. I am haunted every day by the choice I made to leave. It was never because I stopped loving you or our son. I was lost, overwhelmed by fears I couldn't face. I hope someday you can forgive me for the pain I caused. Please tell Thomas that I always thought of him, even when I was silent. The words hit Thomas like a wave, stirring emotions he had buried deep inside. He realized how much had been left unsaid between the three of them, how the silence had shaped his life and his understanding of love. That evening, Thomas sat with his mother under the soft glow of the kitchen lamp. They talked about forgiveness, about letting go of anger and pain, and about the possibility of rebuilding a family fractured by years of absence. Lillian smiled, her eyes shining with quiet strength. Love isn't about waiting for perfect moments or perfect people. It's about holding on, even when things are broken. Thomas nodded, feeling a newfound peace settle within him. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but with his mother by his side, he was ready to face the future with hope. Spring arrived in Canterbury, painting the city with soft blossoms and warmer days. The bench by the cathedral, once a symbol of waiting and loss, now became a place of new memories for Thomas and Lillian. Together, they walked the cobblestone streets, visited the quiet corners of the town, and shared simple pleasures like afternoon tea and fresh pastries at the cafe. Nathan, Thomas's childhood friend, came to visit from London and noticed the change in him, a lightness in his step and a gentleness in his voice. One afternoon, while sitting on the bench, Thomas spoke quietly, I've spent so long angry at a man I barely knew. Now I understand he was lost too. Maybe it's time to let go of the past and live for what's ahead. Lillian smiled, squeezing his hand. And I'm proud of how far you've come. We can carry the past without letting it weigh us down. They talked about plans, small trips, family dinners, and even the possibility of reconnecting with distant relatives. For the first time in years, hope bloomed alongside the blossoms of spring. Yet, amid the healing, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel's story was not yet complete. There were still unanswered questions hidden in the pages of the past, waiting to be discovered. As evening fell, they returned to the cafe, where the familiar scent of tea and croissants mingled with memories of waiting and the promise of tomorrow. The past was a chapter closed, but the story of their family was just beginning. One chilly evening, as autumn leaves swirled through the streets of Canterbury, Thomas found himself alone at the cafe, flipping through the last pages of Daniel's journal. Tucked between them was a sealed envelope, yellowed with age and addressed simply, to Thomas, when you are ready. With steady hands, Thomas broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. Dear Thomas, if you are reading this, it means you have found your way back to the truth. I wish I could have been the father you deserved, but life's choices often lead us down paths we never intended. I want you to know that my love for you never faded, even when distance and silence grew between us. I hoped to make things right, but time slipped away faster than I could catch it. I am sorry for the pain I caused your mother, for the years lost, and for the emptiness you felt. Please forgive me if you can. Most of all, I hope you live your life with courage and kindness. Carry our story not as a burden, but as a testament to the strength of love, flawed, complicated, but enduring. With all my heart. Daniel. Tears welled in Thomas's eyes as he folded the letter carefully. The last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. He looked out the window at the softly falling leaves, feeling a quiet peace settle within him. The past had been painful, but it was no longer a shadow over his future. He reached for his phone and dialed Lillian. Mum, he said softly, I think it's time we start writing new chapters, together. Outside, the cafe's warm light spilled onto the street, inviting hope and new beginnings.